Three, two, one. If you've been part of the business community for any length of time, then you know that the business cycle can be tumultuous from radical innovation, disruption, competition coming from different areas. There's always something getting in the way of businesses just trying to stay the course and be successful long term. And this particular time that we're in now is no different. In fact, one of the things we're going to talk about today has to do with the future of management. So we're going to dive into it and let you know what we think. Stay with us. Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Smith. I'm joined by Travis Smith. You're listening and watching the Business Wingman Show. Um, One of the things we've been noticing, and there's a few activities, events that have happened so far this year that I think kind of piqued my curiosity on this. But I don't think it just started this year. I think it's been a slow boil for the last couple of years. And it's this whole idea of how does business value management? Now, management is a huge umbrella, lots of topics underneath of it. But what I'm talking about is the role of management, the person in the manager role. And the reason I'm saying this is because just a week or two ago, there was an article published, and I believe it was Market Watch. Don't hold me to that. Basically, talking an interview with the CEO of Amazon, basically saying that they were going to start eliminating middle management positions, that they felt like the middle managers were more of a bottleneck than anything else. So they're going to get rid of that layer and they're just going to empower the employees to be more self-sufficient, make more of the decisions, and try to make things a little leaner and stuff like that. So that's obviously a big one when you get a company of that size making that kind of proclamation. Because when name brand companies say stuff like that, there's a whole lot of smaller ones that are sitting there thinking, that's something I should be doing. So I think we ought to talk about that today about what is threatening management? Is it the people moving into it? Is it other things around it? What are your thoughts, Travis? When you think about the management role in the whole running of a business, how valuable is that to you?
Well, I mean, just think about where we are today versus going back 25 years ago, right? So, right at the turn of the century, you're going in from 90s into early 2000s. You had the dot-com boom, right? The way things were operating even back then in comparison today is completely different, right?
Hmm.
So, I think what's important, or at least what I hope people have a takeaway from in this discussion today, is that if the approach you are taking from a management perspective stays the same throughout your career, you're probably missing an opportunity.
Or you're losing ground. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I think so.
So the best managers, the people out there who are kind of lauded time over time as the best leaders, they are constantly looking for better ways to serve their constituents, which means they're either reading, they're staying up to date on new practices, right? They're judging their own practices. And when you talk about, for example, some of these Fortune 500 companies or some of these tech companies that are doing away with mid-level management, you might be able to argue that maybe should have been done 15 years ago, right?
Yeah, I agree because back when the PC got into the world of business, it was probably early mid 90s. Then as it got close to the 2000s, most people had computers in work. It's obviously evolved since then.
Do you,
But
you remember? Do you remember the first PC that you had?
yeah, I do. It was Commando 64 or what?
I don't even know what the hell
Commodore,
that is.
Commodore? No, that was a group. Something 64
Wow, you
was
are
the
really
thing.
dating yourself here. Commando, Commodore.
Well, okay. So the screen, you only got two colors, either dark green or black. And the words that went across the top were either white or yellow. And that
Yeah,
was
that
kind
was
of
a
where it
DOS
started.
system.
And we all had a dot matrix printer.
Yeah.
It was very primitive, okay? But that ushered in a certain level of disruption for managers who now had to figure out how to best use that. And of course, everybody had this idea, oh, we're going to get replaced by computers. Well, today that topic has shifted I mean, it's still running in the same direction, but now it's like, okay, is management going to get replaced by AI? And I know there's people talking about it, there's people thinking about it, because there's all kinds of stuff out there, articles, videos, things, from people, whether they're experts or not, just chiming in and talking about how AI is going to streamline the business structure, which includes eliminating certain areas of the business hierarchy.
Okay, so I want to address that real quick because this is very now. AI is not necessarily new, right? I mean, like for example, The Matrix. You remember those movies with
Oh yeah,
Keanu
yeah,
Reeves?
yeah.
They were talking about AI back in the late '90s and early 2000s. So,
Right.
it's funny how I think for a fair amount of people, the idea of AI is new, but it's kind of been around for a while. It's just making some really big ground in terms of its usability in the workplace
Well, yeah,
at
because
present.
now there's any number. I would venture to say there's probably 30 to 40 different platforms out there now, and
Right.
that's probably growing every week, of tools that the everyday person can get access to. So now you can morph yourself up to a level of writing sophistication or problem solving skill that you innately didn't have before, because now you have a tool that can do most of it for you.
Right. And the short story I was going to share on this piece, and look, what I'm not saying here is that AI is not going to change things so much that people might not lose their jobs. I think that's possible.
Right.
However, this fervor that's going on right now, that it's going to change things so much that everybody's going to be unemployed, I think is a little far fetched. And the example I will give you is I started my job, my career, in the kind of early 2000s time period.
Hmm.
That was right when job boards, online job boards, were just coming into play.
Okay.
So, these online job boards like Career Builder, Monster, those were kind of the first big ones. People were losing their mind back then. They were like, oh, this is going to kill the recruiting industry. The staffing industry's
Right.
dead. Why would you even need that service anymore?
Right.
Right. The funny thing is, fast forward 20 years out of that, in my opinion, I think it's actually even made those industries more important because what it's done is it's created this bottleneck of data and process that, in some instances, of course, it has helped. But
Right.
in just as many instances as where it's helped, it's hurt the process. So
Hmm.
take that same idea and now apply it to AI, right?
Right. Right.
You're still going to need people to do sales. You're still going to need people to um, do certain types of financial transactions, to invest, to go get investors, right? AI is not going to replace that.
No.
So,
And I think it's probably good to inject this thought into this part of the conversation, that I think of AI as a management tool, not a management replacement.
correct.
And look, there's going to be some low level, very automatic supervisory roles that people are going to find ways to get rid of. Okay. And you know what? In the general course of business evolving and being more efficient, it's probably a good idea. But I think companies that are really thinking forward and they're looking for ways to populate their organizational structure. Because let's face it, here's one of the big problems I see when you eliminate the management layer altogether. You cut off the ability for people to rise up through the organization. To take somebody from a shop floor or an engineering desk or any other level where you're actually producing what the company's out there to sell, and expect that person to jump from that to some executive role, some strategic role, I think is too big a jump. And sometimes having that management filter gives them a broader understanding of how the company works, what they have to do in order to help it meet its goals. And it's a very productive learning environment. But you slash that all together, and AI is not going to fix 100% of that.
Yeah, and look, and I'll contend that I'll agree with most of what you just said here. And I think practically in business, one should be careful about going in and just wholesale slashing entire processes, departments, right? Or because what you'll find is even if the majority of the department, the position, whatever it may be, might not be effective, there will be nuances of it that are really effective. So
Right.
by getting rid of that, you're actually creating more problems than you're solving.
Right.
So, in this instance of this company up in the Bay Area that's slashing kind of middle management, I read the article. My biggest takeaway was if by having people in those roles, and when we're saying mid management, what we're referring to are people who, from a job title perspective, manager, senior manager, right? At that level.
Project
Maybe
manager.
even
Yeah.
maybe even lead
Right.
in some aspects, if you're going to talk software development and whatnot. By getting rid of those folks, what the company intends to do is to streamline the process in particular so that people who are in a non-management level, individual contributors, can make decisions quicker,
Hmm.
which then speeds up the process in which the business is operating.
Right.
Because the one thing that I recall the article talking about was everybody along the way needs to put their stamp of approval, right? Their watermark on that, and or cause problems or get in the way to show that they're validating their job,
And you know
right?
what? If management has become part of a big cog in the bureaucratic machine, then I think that's smart to be looking at that and saying, is this really helping drive efficiency and consistency and output, or is it slowing things down and creating drama because stuff never ends up making it? We don't hit deadlines anymore because there's too many people trying to weigh in.
Right.
So I totally agree with that. But here's what I would like to do. Let's talk a little bit about if your track is management, and if you're in a management role now, what do you need to start developing on your own to make you a higher value manager so that even if they're looking at slimming down the management force and, of course, making everybody that's left responsible for more stuff, what is it you need to really get good at to show the company that getting rid of you would be a big mistake?
I will contend the number one answer to that is having emotional intelligence. You've heard of other people refer to this as EQ, right?
Hmm.
The emotional quotient. I really think that people who are in management who do the best, who are able to A, get things done,
Right.
support their teams, and move the organization forward. It's interesting how most of them have a really good EQ,
Yes.
which means they can step back and remove their own personal biases and they can see things as they're happening, even things that may be considered a bit undercurrent, right?
Right.
And how that usually shows up is the way people's body language, right? The way people may be feeling, even though they're not necessarily saying it out loud.
Well, just hey,
Recognizing,
half the battle is just showing up and knowing based on viewing the audience, knowing your people well enough to know, what their emotional range is, not just showing up and opening your mouth and throwing a Scud missile into the discussion and have people go off on tangents and all of a sudden you got drama on your hands. So I think you're right. I think anybody in a leadership role needs to be really good at that so they can keep people at a calm enough environment to be able to get through problems, get back to work, or to address opportunities, get something going, and not have people just all in their heads and then you got to walk them off, back them off the cliff.
right. Your comment here about what are the things that people in management, as they're looking to kind of move themselves forward into the future, if we're first looking at kind of EQ, the next thing I would look at is how are we developing excellence within our team so that we're prepping our team to be able to take on critical pieces of work within the business. Another way to kind of look at this is, are we doing a good job delegating, right? Have you ever noticed this? People who tend to be really poor from a management perspective, despite the fact they are in management, a lot of times don't delegate. They'll sit there and get involved in all these little nuances,
Right.
right? And it's almost like they're doing their employees' jobs for them.
Well, they pay good money to outfit their staff with capable folks, and then those folks sit around and watch the manager doing their job for them. Um, but you know what I think ends up creating that problem, and this is another area that really permeates leadership in general, whether you're at the management level or executive level. is people who are still holding on to the old command and control style
Yes.
of being in a management role. Everything has to be controlled, which might mean I need to do it because you're not capable, or I think I'm better, whatever that case may be. And what I'm seeing is a slow ebb of moving into managers as coaches, coaches and mentors. You know, you establish a presence that other people want to identify with, and then you help them get to that point, as opposed to legislating everything they have to do.
And I love that because if you look at it from the term coach, like, take soccer, for example. The coach never gets on the field and
Right.
actually plays ball. They're
Right.
not out there running plays. They're not out there shouldering defenders, right? They're on the sidelines.
Yes.
So if you take that analogy from a business standpoint, people who are in management, if you want to lead as a coach, what that means is you're training and developing your team to go out and be successful on the field
Right.
without you needing to be there.
Yes.
So a really good kind of like a little test for people who are listening. If you're in a management role, take a week off from work. Now, I know not everybody can do that, but this is a fun little test. It has to be more than a couple days.
Mm-hmm.
Take off from work for a week and see what happens. If your operation or division, whatever it is you oversee, continues to run smoothly, your people are empowered, they're making decisions, you come back. I'm not saying you're not going to come back to a mountain of work, but the fact that things moved forward in the process without you being there is a great sign that you were leading and leading well.
All right. So
However, wait, hold on.
I,
However, if you leave and literally the shit hits the fan, nobody knows what they're doing, nobody can answer anything, right? Nobody's showing up on time. That is a clear sign that your management approach and tactics are not working.
right. Okay, so what I was going to interject there, because I've actually seen this with a couple of past clients, is when they finally got around to leaving, whether it was vacation, business trip, whatever, they left the building for an extended period of time. They come back, they find out that the team that they were overseeing actually worked better.
Yes.
Why? Because the drama that was injected by the manager, many times unknowingly, that whole lack of emotional intelligence and being able to listen and delegate, all those kind of things, when that person took that dysfunction out of the environment, everybody took a sigh of relief. It's like a breath, and said, okay, we know what we're doing, let's just do it without the drama, because the drama's gone for a week.
Yeah, and if you have that experience where when you come back to your operation and things were actually running better,
Hmm.
it really would behoove us in that moment to sit ourselves down and really think, all right, maybe I have something to change myself,
Right.
right? And this goes back to that EQ piece. EQ as a leader, emotional intelligence, is not just being able to survey other people and their experiences and behaviors and how they're showing up. It's how we're behaving and showing up and
Hmm.
how that impacts other people.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Look, it's a complex subject. Um, but this guy, Daniel Goldman, wrote a book that was back in 1967 called, I think it was called EQ at the time. But he's kind of recognized in the industry as the father of launching this thing to where people could understand it and figure out how to work with it. So that's a great book to read to really get an idea of how that affects you and your job. Um, the other thing I would throw out at this point is recognizing that technology is going to continue to be somewhat of an onslaught in the business world. Rather than try to figure out how to sidestep it or slow it down, all this stuff is designed to do is produce data, information at a very rapid speed. And if you can get used to understanding what to look for, how to read it, how to interpret what it means to your team or your organization, right there, you've just ushered in massive value to the company you're working for. Because I can't tell you how many companies I've worked for that they're just drowning in data and they don't look at most of it because they don't really know what they're looking for, and there's always something more important to do than reading reports. So a lot of this time just keeps getting churned out, and it goes over and it lays on the pile with all the stuff from years ago. And so if you can get really adept at knowing what to look for and how to read it and how to kind of synthesize all the detail into really salient topics about this is what it's telling us, that works at any level.
So if you think about this idea of, you'd made a comment just a moment ago about kind of the blend of software tools, right? Online tools mixed with management practices. And then this bigger idea we're talking about today of how do we move forward and continue to be relevant, perhaps,
Yes.
as management. Are there any other tools, whether they're online or software tools, that you can think of that if someone's not using them today, it's probably a good idea they start looking into it?
Well, most every company should have a CRM system. And if it's being used correctly, that's the heartbeat of what's going on between you and the customer you serve. You not only need to know how that works, but you need to help your team use it effectively because it's just like anything else, garbage in, garbage out. And I have, again, I know a host of companies that have invested mightily in CRM systems. And when they were all up and running and connected together and everything, they're like, they're clapping their hands, say, okay, that's done. Well, no, it's not. Because now you got to teach and train everybody to use it so that it produces something. So that's a system. I think whatever AI of choice you're using is something that can help broaden your perspective on how you need to think about critical issues and opportunities and things like that. But I also think that when it comes to dealing with people, the emotional intelligence, which you talked about, improving your communication style to include more empathy. Instead of just slamming down some judgment on what you hear, what you thought you heard somebody say, and learning how to pull a little more out of people, which means you have to ask good questions and then just listen. I think that is the hallmark of a manager who's really got it together because it's like they've got their finger on the pulse of everybody working for them and they can figure out where the next Scud missile's coming from just by how people are phrasing things and what they're willing to talk about and what they're not willing to talk about. That takes practice, but you could be in a management role 4 or 5 years and not be any better when it comes to really good communication than the day you started.
Man, you stole my idea.
What?
Communication.
Oh, sorry.
So, well, but you didn't get all the way into where I was going to go. So
All
that
right. Well,
leaves me some
I
room,
left you some room there. Go
that
ahead.
leaves me some room to soapbox here for a
Right.
moment. Um, I agree with what you just said because if we're not communicating effectively, we are potentially actually creating worse situations, right? Because all the miscommunication, people not understanding what the goal of the business is, how their job engages with that goal, right, or the initiative or whatever it is. One of the things that I would strongly recommend for our listeners, if you are not using one today, and this is nothing new.
Hmm.
What I'm about to share here, this is not like, holy crap, I've never heard of that before.
Right.
A dashboard.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yes.
Because here's the thing. I have seen this too often where when management communicates, they send out these long drawn out emails,
Oh, yeah.
right? And it's just, you know what? I mean, here's the reality. Nobody's going to read all that stuff, right?
Or I agree with you. Not only are they going to read it, but many times people will skim them. And the biggest problem is they skim over the important stuff because
Right.
there's no differentiation between what's important and what's just filler.
Correct. Or they're skimming it to see if there's anything in there that's directly applicable to them and their
Right,
job,
right. Does this
right?
apply to me? If not,
Exactly. So, my recommendation is get a tool where you can weekly, if not daily, utilize a dashboard that communicates to your department or the organization at large where the company's heading, what the opportunities are, right? And whatever it is, right? And
Right.
so in our organization, we do this every single week. It comes out on a Wednesday. We use two different tools. One is the tool that actually builds the dashboard, but then the second one is how we communicate it. There are
Mm,
a lot of tools that do both, but we have an intranet here that's powered by SharePoint. I'm not, for our listeners, I'm not telling everyone that SharePoint is the best thing I've ever seen,
right.
but it's effective
Good.
and pretty much anybody can use it, right? And if you're boiled up into all the other Microsoft suite of tools, you already probably have access to SharePoint, right?
Yes.
So the bigger thing here, though, is a consistent communication that allows everybody to know where the organization is at on a weekly basis. And it doesn't need to be this long, drawn out email.
Right.
When we
Right.
do it, we have four visuals. One is three of them are circle charts, pie charts, and then one of them is a line graph. And then we have four bullet points under that content. It's the same format every week, but it changes and updates based on where our company is at.
Hmm.
But at least that way, no one can say that they've never heard of that, they've never seen it, or they don't know where we're going.
Right.
You still need to talk about it. I wouldn't err on the side of just sending that out and then never having any other discussions.
Yes.
But the visual aid that comes with a dashboard is really important because everybody assesses, perceives, and reads information differently. So
Yes.
if you're only sending out an email and it's text versus sending out only pictures, people are going to perceive that differently. So I will conclude here that a combination that is in Cliff Notes form of the two of those, text and visual aids via a dashboard, is, in my opinion, the best way to go about that, ensuring that you're communicating effectively.
Yeah, because you don't want to, I mean, send stuff out there that could be subject to varying interpretation. That's the worst thing. So I agree with you. It needs to be concise. It needs to be visually impactful, whether you just write good and write brief or you throw graphs in on top of it. But
Right.
everybody needs to come to the same conclusion about the state of affairs for your department or your company. So yeah, I agree with that. But what we're talking about here today is instead of looking at AI as the boogeyman, figuring out what parts of it are going to work best for your company, which means saying no to a whole bunch of other stuff that looks neat and does cool stuff, but doesn't really add to your ability to read the tea leaves of your business and make really good decisions about where to go and what to do next.
Oh, and you know where that comes up? In software sales, in
Yes.
tools. So the cheap, easy one that I'll share that I'm sure people who are listening have probably experienced or seen is when you're buying a CRM platform, the tool. A lot of these tools, especially today, come with an AI function built into them, right? Some of them can be really nice. The trick, though, is assessing the tool for applicability within your organization.
Right.
The example I'll give, I'd like to probably think at this point, most professionals are aware of Salesforce.
Okay.
Salesforce is a gigantic sales kind of sales ERP into a CRM tool. I mean,
Right.
don't quote me on this. My guess is it's probably the largest tool out there.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
I agree with that.
said, the amount of modules and build-ons that you can do within that tool is completely overwhelming.
Right.
So the reason I bring this up is because I have seen on multiple occasions where a company will bring in a tool. One of them was Salesforce. They're, like you were saying earlier, they're high-fiving. All right, check the box. We got a new tool. Isn't that exciting? Fast forward 9 months into having that tool completely integrated into the business. Take a guess what percentage users were utilizing the tool, meaning if you have 10 components of the tool, how many of those 10 were being used on average by the users?
It's probably what, less than 15%?
You are doing well at 25 to 30%.
Wow.
So, what that means is 70% of the tool you just bought, maybe because it has all this fancy AI data driven capabilities in it, is not being used.
Right. Yes.
And these tools are not cheap.
No, no,
For example,
Salesforce isn't cheap. HubSpot's another one for marketing that's
right.
very, very complex and can cost a bit of money there too. So yeah, I agree with all that. I think and I was just going to say in ending this whole topic here, if you as a business owner or a key executive in a larger company are kind of starting to pay attention to the trend in management, and you might be looking at that as a way to, save money or create more efficiencies, I would challenge you to really look at the management roles you have and say, with the right people in these roles, could we be getting more that helps our business grow, be more competitive, be more profitable? Certainly maybe cut down on the drama and the revolving door of people leaving and shit. Um, Take a look at that first and ask yourself, are we doing justice to that role? And if we're not, figure out a way to do justice with it. And then maybe you have to trim one or two that don't seem like they're of real value. That's fine. But don't just cast the whole thing aside as being a glut of people who are in career, building transition and they're not doing well. And that happens a lot. You get a lot of people that are great individual contributors. They get tapped to lead their own team or to lead some other team in a company, and they're out in left field. It's like, I don't know what to do now. I know what I'm going to do, but I don't know what I need to do with all the rest of these people. So I think training and mentoring has to happen if you're not only going to have really solid people managing, but you're going to create a pipeline of dedicated people that want to move up when you decide to move out.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's more at this point than just having the intention to want to do these things. Once you actually identify what it is and then you implement it, you've really got to spend that time and that investment being engaged to make sure that it's getting up and running and
Yeah,
that it's being used and your employees are trained, to your point that you just brought up.
right.
So important. We can't just bring a new tool in, a new philosophy, a new practice process, whatever it is,
Right.
and then say, hey, here you go, and then wash our hands of it.
Right. Right. Like a lot of things in business. All right, folks, listen, thanks for being with us today. We hope you got a lot of value out of this. And if you are in a management role and you're tapped into social media and all the other stuff going on the internet and you're kind of feeling a little squeamish about your future, take some of the stuff we talked about and run with it. Because it doesn't matter whether you stay in a management role at the company you're in or you move off to something else down the road. Once you've got ownership for it, it will serve you well everywhere. So make sure you tune yourself up. If you run the company, make sure you think about some of the things we talked about to find out if you're really getting the most out of the people that you've put in management roles. So thanks for being with us today. We bring out brand new topics every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So stay with us. Come back and please subscribe and like this program. And we'll be back to you next week with another great topic. Thanks a lot, Travis. Talk to you later.